I've been privileged enough to meet people that are maintaining their innocence, and those characters and individuals who, are guilty, have pled guilty, or have said that they entered a not guilty plea, but they were playing the system because they knew that they did do it. And actually, all of them will say that where someone who has previous convictions stands up and says, I didn't do this, you kind of take a little bit more notice.
Welcome back for another episode of the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. So I don't know about you, but lately, more and more, I feel like I am living a double life, which in a way I have, and I am, because obviously I've got this day job that I've had for now just under a year. They don't know about what I do here with you guys with the podcast, and there's different reasons for that. And I think it is good, actually. It's good. I kind of just need to feel the freedom to do what I do here with you and not having to worry about, my boss hearing this or my colleagues hearing this, all of that stuff. But yeah, I wonder how many of us feel this way, it's not being able to completely show yourself. I guess it's part of is a normal part of being in society, but I do find it difficult to accept it in my head. And yeah, I guess I wanted, it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear from you if that is something that you deal with. I mean, you may have a whole other life outside of work that your workplace doesn't know about. And it may not necessarily be because it's something that it's not necessarily something they would judge. It's just that something that you want to keep for yourself. I'd love to hear how you process that in your head, in your mind. I'm curious. I'd like to hear from you on that. So in today's episode, I talk with Dr. Louise Hewitt from the Innocence Project London. The Innocence Project network is all over the world, I believe. It's definitely in the US. They're quite big out there as well. And so they work on helping individuals who have been wrongfully convicted and are serving a sentence in prison. And so we go over what happens when you're wrongfully convicted. How do you go about repairing that? How do you go back into where do you get how can you get help? Also, what do you do if you are arrested and they've put you in that little jail behind the police station? What are the things that you need to know? What are your rights, and what should you do? We're talking about some of the things that her clients go through, how she deals with all of this. And honestly, it is an episode I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I didn't even realize we had an Innocence Project in the UK. I was focusing on in the US. And so I'm really, really happy that she said yes to be on the podcast. And I do hope to also eventually speak to someone who has been exonerated. It's something I have been in the process of trying to get someone for a while. Again, I was focusing in the US, so maybe I should focus on other geographies, including Wales, where I believe there's someone who has been exonerated. So there you go. So without further ado, I almost forgot. So I'm going to have to do a little selfish call out. Don't forget to share this podcast if you enjoy it. Share with your friends. Give it a 5-star rating. You can leave a review. Please subscribe to it. Please follow it you can follow on Spotify as a follow, on Apple Podcasts and other places is subscribe. Please just remember it is free. It's always free to listen to this. Even though it says the word subscribe, you're not paying anything. So it is free. Please do that. It really, really helps getting this podcast in front of more ears. And it's for episodes like this. This is really, really important. I want to be able to bring this message to as many people as possible. So please, without further ado, help me give a big, warm welcome to Louise. Let's begin. Hi, Louise. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Angie. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Really, really excited. And what we're going to talk about today is something I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time. And so I'm very, very quite humbled, actually, that you said yes to come to the podcast. And we're going to talk about wrongful convictions, focusing in England and Wales, and the pro bono work that you do at the Innocence Project London. You have a very long list of accolades, and from experience, those with the most say the least. So I would like to boast for you on your behalf, embarrass you a little bit, and do that just so people exactly know who we're dealing with. So you are a senior lecturer at the University of Greenwich. You're a senior lecturer in law. You are disability named, Contact Law School, supervisor for postgraduate research students, editorial board member Compass, lead criminal justice collective research unit, deputy director. I mean, there's a lot. I could go on and on and on and on. But then you are, the reason why you're here today is the work that you do at the Innocence Project London, which you co-founded in 2010 as a project manager before becoming director in 2017. You are, which is a member of the Innocence Network in the USA, if anybody else knows the Innocence Project in the US. You are co-founder of the European Innocence Network from 2018. You are a placement provider as well for a university in the US within the IPL program. And again, there's a lot more I could say. You have won awards. You're a winner of Faculty Star Awards, Student-Led Teaching Awards, University of Greenwich, highly commended Extra Mile Awards, Student-Led Teaching Awards, University of Greenwich twice, 2018, 2017. Recognitions. Okay, hold on. Recognitions.
Wow.
National Teaching Fellow 2021. Senior Fellow Higher Education Academy and Trustee of Clinical Legal Education Organization, CLEO. Basically, all to say, you guys, that the work that Louise here does is extremely important. It has a lot of impact. She really knows what she's talking about. So, now that I've embarrassed you, Louise, before we dive in, please, in your own words, introduce yourself, where you live, and what you do.
Okay, thanks, Angie. I don't think I've ever heard that list read back to me. So yeah, that's I do a lot. No, so I'm Dr. Louise Hewitt. I am, as Angie said, a senior lecturer at the University of Greenwich, and I'm director of the Innocence Project London. And it's my passion. It's something that I'm very engaged with. I'm very passionate about, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to spend some time talking about it.
Can you, for those who don't know, what does the Innocence Project London do?
So the Innocence Project London operates on the American Innocence Project model. And we work with students, so students from the University of Greenwich. They are law students, criminology students, psychology students, sociology students. I think we've got someone from politics in there as well this year. And the students, alongside myself, other academics, and also lawyers that work with us pro bono, we deconstruct claims of innocence. So the claims of innocence are from individuals who have been convicted and they have exhausted the English criminal appeals process. And by that, I mean they have either appealed their conviction and that appeal has been dismissed in the Court of Appeal, or they have had leave to appeal, so permission, as it were, to appeal denied. And in both of those situations, the only recourse for an individual who is maintaining their innocence and has been convicted is to make an application to the English Criminal Cases Review Commission, known as the CCRC. And that is the only body that has the power to return a case back to the English Court of Appeal Criminal Division in order for that case to be reheard again. So students then work on these cases with a view to making an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission on behalf of our clients.
And this is such also an unusual way because it is very lengthy. Because obviously these are people who are then, or most of them they're already in prison, right? And they are, how do you call it in English? Like they are doing their time. That's not the right way to say it. Like
no, serving their sentence.
Thank you. I was looking for sentence.
That's okay.
Serving they're serving their sentences, a sentence, and by all means, it doesn't seem to have any recourse to come out. They're gonna stay there, and by the time they come to you, you then help them to make this application to the CCRC, and if the CCRC approves of it, then it goes back to court or it goes back for review for them to see if they can then be proven innocent. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's essentially the way our English criminal justice system works is that you have a trial. If you're convicted at trial, you have 28 days to launch an appeal. But in order to get your appeal heard, you need to apply for leave to appeal, permission to appeal. So if that is denied, again, the only way that you can appeal, or carry on to try to get your case back into court is through the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Or if you do get permission allowed, so leave that you're allowed to go to appeal, but that appeal is then heard in the Court of Appeal and dismissed, again, you can only make an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. And the framework that the Criminal Cases Review Commission operates in and the requirements are fresh evidence. So that means evidence that was not used at trial and not used on appeal, or a new legal argument. And that is a legal argument, again, not used at trial or on appeal. And the test they apply, which is in legislation, in law over here, is something called the real possibility test. So the test they apply to an application is whether there is a real possibility that the Court of Appeal will find the conviction unsafe. And there's no definition of what real possibility is, and obviously lots of issues around the phrasing of that test in terms of kind of how independent it makes the Criminal Cases Review Commission.
So if we were to sort of zoom in and really see actually what this actually really means in everyday life.
Yeah.
Because when we look at wrongful convictions, I'm sure if you're listening, you would hear of people who have been in jail, they were innocent and they spent 20 years, 38 years in jail and they finally got exonerated. This is the kind of work that we're talking about that Louise is doing. And it is very, very hard to actually get exonerated. Unfortunately, wrongful convictions, which is what happens when these people they served a sentence where they were innocent. Wrongful conviction is actually more easily done than not. It can actually happen to anyone, right? It's a little bit of a scary situation. Or am I exaggerating here, Louise?
No, I think it's fair to say that I suppose it's very much dependent on the situation and on the case attached, the case facts and the situation you find yourselves in. But essentially, yes, anybody is at risk in terms of being wrongfully convicted. Some probably more so than others in very complex cases, in cases often concerning joint enterprise liability.
So what does that mean in layman terms? What do you mean by joint enterprise liability?
So joint enterprise liability is a situation that arises where you have two or more people that go to commit an offence. So say you have defendant one and defendant two. They agree to commit an offence. And during the course of that offence, something else happens, and maybe D2 goes on to commit a further offence. Mm-hmm. And it was law for a little while that D1, defendant one, would be held accountable for the defendant two's actions to the same standard as the second defendant. That is now not the case anymore. But joint enterprise cases where you have lots of individuals charged with the same offence, but no evidence against each individual character in that charge sheet, that's where you're more at risk in terms of miscarriages of justice and certainly wrongful convictions from happening.
Obviously, it sounds like those are already two defendants who are already almost like admitting they've gone in, let's say, do a burglary, right? And then one of them did something worse. But let's say if you're being wrongly accused, you may have been part of a lineup and you've been recognized as the person who did the crime and you were completely innocent, but somehow you are wrongfully convicted. Is that something that can, are those things that you sort of see, like that you see come through your desk, that can happen that still happen to this day?
Mistaken eyewitness identification. Yeah, that is something. We've had a couple of cases concerning that. Definitely in terms of a disparity between the eyewitness identification and then certainly how the identification parades were carried out in concerning not just the defendant, but also maybe distinguishing features and things like that kind of maybe were a distinguishing feature of our client, but weren't necessarily covered up in the way they should have been on the identification parade. So yeah, eyewitness mistaken identity is an issue over here. Not so much because identification evidence doesn't tend to be the sole evidence normally that's used. What we do see is CCTV evidence being used in cases quite a lot, but very poor quality CCTV evidence. So and that definitely has an impact on the jury. Also, on the influence that has when it's in court. You can't necessarily see people clearly, but you'll get an expert standing there saying, well, I can tell that it's that person from the way they're standing, and that's probably that person there. And once the jury hear those things, it's very hard for them not to be influenced by it.
Well, that's part of the issue, right? Is the issue of storytelling, right? Which is what, like, in the UK, like do we say the lawyer or the solicitor or because there's a few terms, because we always see, like, the audience is both mainly US based and mainly UK based. So I just want to make sure I get the right term and that people know which one I'm talking about. When in England, in court, if you are defending someone, or are you a lawyer in the court or solicitor or barrister?
If you're advocating in court, it's a barrister normally in criminal cases.
Okay. So
there are other divisions of that. You can get solicitor advocates, but normally for the purpose of your audience, that you can refer to barrister.
Okay. So a lot of it also is to do with how, because there is a saying. Let me just find it here, which I heard Maria Konikova. So I don't think it's her quote. She took it from someone else. She's a journalist and psychotherapist, and she talks about storytelling and the art of the con and stuff like that. In one of her talks, she says that the case that wins is not the one with the best evidence, but with the lawyer who presents the strongest story is the one the jury will go with. So I don't know if you found that to be true, but I think there's a lot of things to be said of how you can sway someone, right? And storytelling is one of those that stops people from really going into that second part of the decision making, of verification, of fact checking. We love a good story and we get swayed by it. So if someone, I can imagine that if an expert comes on and says, well, by the way they're standing or sitting and this and that, I can definitely say that's the accused over there, that's the person on that CCTV tape. It's going to be very difficult to undo that. I mean, I don't know. Is that something that you found to be true, or?
I wouldn't disagree with that quote at all. I think that effective counsel can be very persuasive, and I think as humans, you know, the role of the jury is to weigh up the evidence, and come to a conclusion in terms of how they then are directed to accord that evidence as to guilt, whether that defendant is guilty. But I think it's human nature that you will, favour maybe one person's way of telling a story over another. The degree to which that influences you as a jury member, that's not my area of study, but knowing people that I work with where it is, there is a degree of influence there. Because it's human nature, isn't it? I think it is.
Yeah.
it's human nature that you will go, you'll understand someone's story better, someone's narrative. You'll think it's more likely, on the facts, beyond reasonable doubt, that there is, that you would be persuaded, say, by maybe what the prosecution said. But certainly you're right. Once evidence is in the courts and the jury have seen it, and that goes for CCTV evidence, it is really difficult to, even if the judge directs the jury to disregard that, too late. They've seen it. It's so influential.
Yeah, I mean, that's too late. And I think they know that, I'm going to say lawyers for both because it's too confusing for me. So I'm going to say the lawyers in the court. Sorry.
That's a very apt description. Do carry on.
Yeah, I'm bringing it down a level. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I think because I guess like one lawyer is only as good as the other one, right? So however they're going to sway the jury. And I think that, I mean, to me, that's why, like you said, like when the judge says you can disregard that, we're too late. It's in the brain now, and they're gonna weigh it. They're not professional at not being biased in that way. Like, it's too difficult. I mean, even I would be like, no, I saw that. I'm noting this, So I think, I don't really understand the whole why the concept of a jury and why that's fair, because I dread the day. I hope I will never be like asked to go on a jury, because I just don't understand how I would know, because I'm no better than, when that show Google Box, people like commenting on the show, like that'll be it. That'll be me on the jury going, oh yeah, like it's just like, how am I to be able to even discern good quality evidence, good lawyerism, whatever, like the pressure is on. And I don't know. How do you, talking about, I guess opinions and things, like how do you know that, because I'm sure you get quite a few cases on coming through at the IPL. I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to get out of prison. Some of them are genuinely innocent or at least being wrongfully convicted. How do you know that you have an eligible case? Like, is it pure fact, or does instinct play a part in this? I mean, I don't know if I'm even allowed to ask that question, but like, how do you know?
Yeah, of course. No, it's definitely not instinct, but there is a process in place. So in America, they screen their cases, and we do something very similar. So we have a case assessment process. We work with a team of lawyers who volunteer their time. They're lawyers working in Weil and Gottschall in central London. And their pro bono team, we give applicants' cases to them, and they actually review the applications in terms of the potential for fresh evidence and the potential for a new legal argument. So that means going through documentation such as the judge's trial transcript, which is a record of how the judge has directed the jury at the end of the case, and kind of sums up what has happened during the trial. Any appeal documents, so that means grounds of appeal, if there's an appeal judgment, any other documentation that the applicant wants to make us aware of that is either that wasn't used at trial or appeal, so evidence that wasn't used in those two places. And as I said, that process looks for or determines the eligibility against those two criteria that are needed for an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. And it takes about between 4 to 6 weeks for each case to be assessed in that way. Because you can imagine we get a lot of individuals who apply. We get individuals who apply who didn't like the way the evidence maybe was presented at their trial, who want to try and arguing the same point a different way. And unfortunately, the English criminal justice system doesn't accord for that. So we can't use something twice.
Right.
And it has to be, fresh evidence in the context as I described, or a new legal argument, again, that wasn't used at trial or an appeal. But we do make it clear in when cases, aren't found to be eligible, that the process is not a judgment on their validity as to their claim of innocence.
Yeah.
It's very, we make that absolutely clear. Who are we to judge someone who is claiming or maintaining their innocence in that way? We have the framework that the Criminal Cases Review Commission works to, that we then have to work to in order to make an application to them. And so we have to work within those parameters.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find a way, obviously, to filter and focus, because obviously it's a lot of time, right? Because, like, I don't know if that information is still up to date, but I understand that, because obviously you've been there since 2010, right? So that's over 22 years. It'll be 23 years. No, sorry, did I say that? Sorry.
No, it would be.
That would
it
be
won't be 23.
minus 10. It'll be 13
Take
years.
away the 10.
13 years.
Thinking, yeah, that's not going to work. And my maths isn't very good. So between us, we got there in the end.
Yeah. Oh my God! Do not let me be a judge and give somebody a sentence. I'll double it. So okay. Yeah, so 13 years. And has anyone ever gotten exonerated?
No, we haven't been successful in getting a case returned back to the Court of Appeal. And that used to be, that used to make me feel like a failure, I must admit. My wonderful colleagues in America, I work very closely with Professor Justin Brooks from the Californian Innocence Project, and Professor Mark Godsey from the Ohio Innocence Project. They're absolutely brilliant at it reminds me, look, hey, it took us a while to get our first exoneration. Sometimes over there you work on cases for like 20 years, maybe even longer, to get people out of prison. Yeah. So it used to really dishearten me in terms of, am I doing it right? Is it, maybe I'm not doing it right for the applicants? But actually, I think the longer I've done it, the more I've reached the point that the system is, if you think about going into prison in England, it's a one-way street, and it was only ever envisaged to be a one-way street because the Court of Appeal wasn't set up until 1904, maybe 1907. Mm-hmm. And so it was only ever designed for people to go into prison. It wasn't until people thought or recognized and thought, oh my goodness, people could go into prison incorrectly. People could be wrongfully convicted, or mistaken identity, which a mistaken identity case actually led to the creation of the Court of Appeal. Bit of trivia there for everybody. But it wasn't until that was set up that there was an indication that actually that criminal justice process doesn't always work the way that it should do. And the opportunity gets narrower and narrower. When you think at trial, you're supposed to collect all your evidence together and present it in your defence. Then on appeal, you may be just, if you're lucky enough to have an absent witness that suddenly pops up and sees everything, that's great. But otherwise, you're looking for legal arguments, or maybe some kind of undue process that means that you can appeal. One step further, that window of opportunity for evidence has just got narrower. And it's really, it's really, really difficult. There are innocent people in prison that we can't find the evidence for to make an appeal or make an application, to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. And all the evidence indicates that they shouldn't be there. But we just can't find anything that will help or meet the requirements for that application to the CCRC. And it is really, really frustrating. I must say, my colleagues at Cardiff, Innocence Projects, have been responsible for either two or three maybe, successful cases going back to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. But I live in hope that, we will be successful at some point.
And it will happen. And, my intention with that question wasn't to, wasn't coming from judgment. It's because I
No, it's a great question. And I love talking about it because I think it's really important.
I think it's actually a very important topic because it's not a reflection of the work there. I mean, I guess I'm not a lawyer, so obviously it's very easy for me to say, but like, it's not based on the work that you have done or anyone else who have, who are and have worked at the IPL. But it sort of really shows one thing. One is just, it's really laudable the fact that you're still there. I don't know how you do it because it's obviously, it really is because you really hope to be able to help and, exonerate someone who is, in prison and has been wrongfully convicted. And I think, but it speaks very much also of the fact that the system is very difficult, right? So, because I did read like a few of the papers that you wrote, and it's very clear that it takes a long time just by the time someone comes to you at the IPL. By the time everything is done, it can take a couple of years, maybe longer, to get everything together. It's not because you are not all working on it. It's because to get the paper trail from everybody is a nightmare. I mean, we all know bureaucratic issues, right? I mean, all of us work in an office trying to get something sometimes sorted is a nightmare. And it was only like last week. So never mind something that has happened years ago, different organization, public and private. There's a lot of, it's a lot of bureaucratic work, right? That's can work against you. Maybe people are not, and this is just me saying, that's not you saying, but maybe
no, there are
maybe also some people are not necessarily willing, right? Because I think if someone knows they may have made a mistake, even not on purpose, there's a lot of pride that goes into, there's institutions that they want to protect themselves, there's all kinds of things that could go in, right? And so all of these also breaks on this going forward, right? So it makes it very, very hard, and it slows it down. So I think that was, to me, like the importance of this topic is to really understand that, this is not easy work, and it's very important work, because the reason that it went from, I don't know, was it 20 or 30 in England, and then it went down to like, what was it, 11, 12? I can't remember, but it went down a lot. There's not many Innocence Projects that stand the test of time, and it could be for various different reasons, right? But it's not easy work. And I think maybe, and that's my 2 cents here, it sounds like maybe something needs to be changed at the CCRC level to make sure that maybe it can be a little bit more flexible in terms of what can come back. Because if evidence is showing that someone shouldn't be in prison, but the angle was done in such a way that perhaps the jury was like, oh yeah, definitely innocent, that story sounds really like guilty, something needs to be sorted, because we all know how you can angle something, like observational documentary is never unbiased. There's always an angle, fly on the wall, which direction is the fly looking at? So there's never really, so it sounds like it's like a lot. And I think I'm definitely rooting for you. Like, I really, really I can't wait. And I actually do want to know, do you know how, you may not allow yourself to think that far, but do you know how you and your students and anyone else at the IPL, the pro bono lawyers, how you would want to celebrate when it happens?
Oh God. See, that is a question and a half. Part of me doesn't dare think that far in advance. I wouldn't say I've been worn down over the years, but I think I've become cynical of the system, especially like the criminal justice system, and knowing how difficult it is once you're in it. I mean, I'm just going to recall quickly, one of my students from years and years ago, her boyfriend at the time got accused of something, and she came to me and she told me, and I said, right, okay, I can't advise you, I'm not qualified to do so, but just make sure you've got a really, really good lawyer, and you've got a good lawyer and a good instructing barrister. Anyway, for whatever reason, we kind of missed each other for a bit, and then she came back to me and she told me about the trial date. And I said, what evidence is being presented and all these things. And she reeled it off to me, and there wasn't much. And I was at that point genuinely concerned, because I thought, I can see where this is going to go. But she was saying to me, but the barrister said it's okay. The barrister says, he's fairly confident. And I, even then, was genuinely concerned. And where the case concerns, I suppose, one person's word on the situation and against another person, there was no kind of physical evidence. It was witnesses involved. Her partner ended up getting convicted.
Wow.
And that's, that I knew, I could see it happening. I could see the path it was going down because of my experience on working on the Innocence Project London. And that was really tough, because at the time all I could do was empathize and just say, just make sure. But it wasn't surprising. So he was convicted. And yeah, he was in prison. And I don't know the length of the sentence, but yeah, he was sent to prison. So I think I've become cynical because I know that No matter what a barrister will say, I'm confident or I'm this, I'm that, you genuinely can't be. You do not know what the outcome of that situation would be. So how would I celebrate? I'd celebrate, that's for sure. I wouldn't, I guess I wouldn't want to put parameters on the celebration, but I'm fairly sure my students and I would probably make a very good effort at celebrating. And I hope,
definitely,
I do hope in the future that that's something that I can enjoy.
Yeah. No, and it will. It will. It can only go that way. It can only go that way. Can I ask you actually, because now, obviously, with the example you just said, the girlfriend, studies law, so she, even people who are informed and get advice is very difficult. So I want to ask you in terms of like the look of innocence. Like, because obviously as a society, and we all go around with bias, and consciously, we all have some sort of bias. We have preconceived ideas of what innocence looks like, sounds like. I wonder how that permeates down the justice system. And if it does, like, are there parameters in place to combat that bias and detect it, prevent it? I mean, is that even possible?
I think so. I quite like this topic, and I talk to my students about this actually. But I think the thing about innocence is we definitely do, I think as a society, have this preconceived idea that our innocent person will probably be much better if they had a really good background. So, real standing pillar of the community, had a really good job, a loving family, and no previous convictions, and just happened to be mistaken for someone else. Or, there was some other situation that meant that they got the wrong person. Because I think as a society, we feel sympathy for someone like that. And we can absolutely engage and get behind that individual because, they didn't do anything wrong and look where they come from and they're so great, et cetera, et cetera. I think what happens when and the atypical innocent person, from my experience, doesn't present that way. There is no atypical innocent person. They come from all walks of life, all backgrounds. But more often than not, some of the people that we end up with cases that have been deemed eligible for us to work on, there's the potential for fresh evidence or a new legal argument, are individuals that have got previous convictions. And they're not people that are going to elicit sympathy from members of the public, because the general view is that if you have previous convictions, then you must have done it. You must have. If you've done it once, you can obviously do it again.
Do you know, I don't understand that. Like, I kind of understand, because it's like, it's hard, like, and I guess it depends what kind of crime they've done, right? So also that would have an impact, and it depends who's looking at it. Like, as a woman, I will judge harder on someone who's, when I say as a woman, I'm sure maybe a man would as well. But like, there's certain crimes I'd be like, oh my God, you're a monster. How on earth? Do you know what I mean? Like, it obviously
completely, yeah.
There's certain things that will affect me differently. I understand. And it's not right, because like you said, like, just because there's also like context, right? Depending where you grow up, how you had to live and stuff. I mean, I know of people who did not have the same, they didn't have the same card that I was handled. And so the likelihood for them to end up in a bad way was much, much higher, way higher, just because of the things they had to do to survive as teenagers, that I did not have to do. So I think there's also a lot of that. And then sometimes people will assume that, now 10 years later, they surely are still doing the same thing. Or maybe at that, it's a hard one, and it's not fair. It is not fair.
No, it isn't fair. And I think actually, having listened to a lot of people, I've been privileged enough to meet people that are maintaining their innocence, and those characters and individuals who, are guilty, have pled guilty, or have said that they entered a not guilty plea, but they were playing the system because they knew that they did do it. And actually, all of them will say that where someone who has previous convictions stands up and says, I didn't do this, you kind of take a little bit more notice, because it's really difficult to maintain your innocence in prison. It is not easy. Now it's changed slightly, but previously you never used to get access to the courses unless you kind of admitted your guilt. For one of our clients, getting their downgrade, so you have different categories of prison over here. You have a category A, B, and C. Getting a downgrade to a category B prison, he ended up having to go to judicial review because the board that makes those decisions just kept knocking him back. However, all of his other co-defendants had been decategorized and moved through the system because they'd accepted their guilt.
So is A like super hardcore prison? Is that what it means by the categories?
As an academic, I probably wouldn't describe it as super hardcore, but you're not far wrong. It's for the serious.
It's like the one you don't want to go to.
Your high risk offences. That's probably the one where you as a prisoner, you probably wouldn't be relishing the thought of ending up there. Category B is for kind of slightly lesser offences. Then category C is more open, and then you go from a C to a more open prison.
Right. Okay. So it impacts the level of incarceration level, like how little freedom you get, to who you are surrounded by, right?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine if you are being accused of a really heinous crime and you are innocent and you end up with other people who have done that kind of crimes. You're not even on that same lead, but you will end up really hardened or something. I mean, it's going to break you. And I don't know. I say that, but like, I don't know how. That's the thing. I saw there was this man, I think in the US, who got exonerated, and he was accused of like something really bad, like of like murdering his mom, maybe even doing something else to her before, like really bad, like just disgusting stuff, and he was innocent and he got exonerated. But imagine he spent at least probably 2 decades in prison. I can't remember the exact number, but long enough, with people who are on that level of criminality and plus the outside world judging you, and you are grieving your mom, and it's just the worst thing ever. I can't even imagine how people survive it. It's tough. There's not even the word to describe it.
Yeah, it is tough. And it's surprising, actually, like for the offences that you end up in a category B prison for. So one of my son's friends ended up in a category B prison for I think it was either reckless driving or dangerous driving. I can't remember which. But when you think you've got in that category D prison, he was mixing with other people that had done, have been convicted for manslaughter, been convicted for much. And I will say more serious offences in the context of, intention to kill or intention to cause serious harm. Yeah. Obviously, all offences are serious, but I'm talking about in that specific context. And he mixed with them, and he's not that, not that type of individual. And that was difficult. That was obviously hugely difficult for his family, but hugely difficult to be on the outside of as well. But it just goes to show you, in terms of the context of what you were talking about, that you can end up in a place in an institution where you're mixing with people that have done some really serious things.
It's really. Before we go to the next bit, I'm sort of like wondering what would be the best strategy. Like, I'm thinking, like, if you end up like that, and let's say you're innocent, right, and you end up in like an awful, like a category A or B. And I don't know if, like, in terms of surviving inside, I don't know if I would, like, even almost, like, exaggerate the crime, going, yeah, I'm such a tough bitch, or actually, like, but then you can't do that and then try and say you're innocent outside, right? Like, it's a really, I don't know what the politics is, but because you'd be like, yeah, don't mess with me, but at the same time, like, tell the outside world you're innocent. I don't know what the card would be to play, but it must be really, really, really tough.
Well, my clients, some of my long-standing clients who I know really well, basically have told me that it's like an unwritten rule that you don't ask what you are kind of in for or in prison for. So it's very rarely are those conversations had. They'll ask how long your sentence is, but they won't necessarily. You don't discuss kind of what you're in prison for.
So it's like in the movies.
A little bit, I think. And I think it must vary from prison to prison. But I think there must be a survival instinct that kicks in. And I get it genuinely does depend on the prison that you go to. I mean, as a visitor, I've been on legal visits to prisons where even we're treated, awfully. We get called do-gooders. I've been left in kind of going through the prison security for the best part of the prison visit. Even though other people have gone through quickly, I've been, left waiting for about an hour, which then eats into the prison visit time. And it is all delay tactics. And there's literally 0 point in making a complaint because, there's always a reason that someone will come up with for that. And it then won't do any good for the person that I'm going in to see. So you just take it on the chin.
It's a real power play, yeah?
Oh, yeah. And I have, if you'd have told me this, I don't know, years and years ago without witnessing it, I'd probably be cynical to it, going, no, surely not. Surely there's things to stop it. Having been on the receiving end, there's 0 to stop it. It goes down to the attitudes of the individuals. And that's as much a truism for something that's also for the individuals that work in the criminal justice system as a whole. You're so dependent on the component parts of the system working to the standard that they should do.
Yeah, I mean, that is the horrible thing because you really are like powerless when you are in that prison, right? I mean, you just have to play the game. It's just, I sound like as if I know and I don't, but like by what I hear, because you have like a lot of your rights are taken away from you. I mean, yeah, there's human rights, but to be fair, you don't have the key to the door. So just by that fact, just that mere fact makes you mega vulnerable. Yeah. But
also you're often not sent to the prison where you're going to be. You're sent to a holding prison for maybe 2-3 weeks. You will then be your prison will be identified. And in that time, you've got, if you haven't brought your clothes to court with you, you've got hardly anything to take in with you. Your family don't really know where you are until you're able to make a phone call to them. You've got no money. It's I guess on one side, society will say, well, it's supposed to be a punishment. You'll have your liberty taken away, et cetera, et cetera. On the other side, for those where the system's failed, you're like, well, yeah, okay, that's one hell of a punishment. Surely there's got to be something done. It blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, it's true. Like if there's someone who really is an awful person, but not everybody's a Jeffrey Dahmer, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Yeah, completely.
So that's the thing. It's like where do you draw the line? So in terms of like practical terms, because I mean, touch wood, let's not jinx it, but in case it happens, like if it happens to you, now what? Like you were arrested for a crime you didn't do. What would you say are the steps that someone who's listening here needs to take to make sure they protect themselves the best they can?
I think obviously I can't provide legal advice. I'm an academic lawyer, not a practicing academic. But from the perspective of what I teach my students when I teach law of evidence, is just be informed about your rights. We have something over here called the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. And that provides information about how the police can conduct their interviews, how you should be treated when you're in custody, all those things. And actually, you can ask the custody sergeant, if you're not offered it, for a copy of the relevant sections of PACE, as it's referred to. But people don't know that. There are lots of street law clinics popping up now that are informing people of their rights. And I think that's the one thing that I would say to people is just be aware, before anything happens, be aware of what your rights are. It's like over here, there's a difference between stop and search and stop and question, and there's different rights associated to it. But, members of the public generally don't know this because the attitude is, well, why would you need to know? I'm on the right side of the law. Why would I need to know those things? But being on the wrong side of the law can change in a heartbeat, can change in a matter of seconds, depending on the situation that you're concerned in. So being aware of what the police can and can't do in terms of that investigatory process, of what your rights are to ask for legal advice, how you consult your solicitor, what you need to do in those situations, your phone calls out, your phone calls in. you have a right to be told if someone calls into the police station, if you've been taken into custody, and you then have that right to then say or advise the police whether you'd like them to be informed that you're there. How many people know that?
And so you could actually choose to not let that person know. You could choose that the police, no, don't tell them.
Oh, no, that happens. I know that happens. I mean, that happens. Someone I know was arrested. Their mum called into the station. They were released without charge, but at no point were they informed that phone call from that parent had been made into the police station, and they should have been.
But let's say if that person didn't want their mum to know, could they have turned around and said, no, don't tell her?
Yeah, so when anyone calls in, the police won't say yes, they're here, or no, they're not. They'll just say, can we take your details? And if we're able to, we will contact you, or we'll get in contact with you. They won't confirm either way.
Okay, and then this way it gives the chance, because I could imagine some husbands or wives not wanting to tell.
Yeah,
like if they call in, and yes, they'll be like, so they have the right to say no, don't tell them.
But that's why that's there for. But obviously, you're reliant on being informed of that in the first place.
Well, that's it. So, but in terms of like super basic, like if you get arrested and let's say you don't have a lawyer on retainer, like, none of us have, but I mean, most of us don't. Yeah. What are your, like, do you call a solicitor, a lawyer? Who do you call? Like, can you call one? Is there someone you can call for free? Can someone come in and represent you like you see in the movies? Like, you're all by yourself. That police has, like, cuffed you up. Do you have the right to do one call? And if you don't have a number, like, how do you do it?
The police will do that. You should be informed when you go into custody that you can call a solicitor. Or you can make a phone call to a solicitor, and if you don't have a solicitor, they can provide you with details of a duty solicitor that covers that police station. And that duty solicitor will be provided free of charge to, represent you in any police interviews and things like that. So you should be informed of that by the police. That's one of the duties that they have to inform you.
I mean, I have to say, and I don't know if this is true because I did not fact check, but that there's someone who told me not that long ago, about quite a scary story of her daughter. And I'm not going to go into the details because it's quite triggering. But her daughter is a white middle-class female and got taken into custody. And what happened to her in there was, if it's true, not good. But her parents had the means to fight this in court and stuff like that. But what the mother was telling me was that's a white middle-class girl. Imagine what happens to all the others. And she says it was just so hard, and apparently it happens a lot, like mistreatment and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking, like, if she were in custody, and it has put the fear of God in me. And I don't know if I need to be paranoid, but I was just like, it sounded really awful because you really are at the mercy of, and it's not obviously there are always going to be some bad elements, right, in every kind of industry, right? It's the same with teachers. If you're going to be a pedophile, you might as well be a teacher, but not all teachers are. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot, that's not the rule, So it's just like, it's an exception. There's going to be bad elements in anywhere you work, right? There are going to be the odd ones, right? And I was just like, it just really scared me. But obviously, I don't know, like, so to hear that, you get the duty solicitor, like the solicitor who's mates with all of the police guys, I'm like, it sounds, even though like it's good to have a solicitor, but it's like, how safe are you? Like, this is where money maybe makes a difference. I just don't know.
I think so. All lawyers have to work to a standard and work to a code of conduct. So, and duty solicitors that go out to police stations do their utmost best in very difficult circumstances to advise their clients. So I think in that context, I know that there is a system in place and it works as well as it can. But more broadly than that, over here, there is an issue with legal aid funding. There is, very little money post the trial process for appeal, and even less money for a lawyer to apply for legal aid to make an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. And that is very difficult because, despite lots of goodwill, and there is goodwill out there from the legal profession, there is just, they're not being, recompensed for the work that they do, which means a lot of it has to be done in their own spare time, very limited spare time. They have hardly any. And it has to be done around the edges of their fee earning caseloads. So we've got a legal system or legal system, but a group of individuals, barristers, that are, being squeezed by the profession. Yeah. And there is you'll hear other academics say there's very little money in law, in criminal law. And there is. It's a real passion for the individuals that do it. And it's a real slog for those that kind of go into it at an entry level. They spend years working for hardly anything, sometimes in deficit, until they start making money.
That's insane. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I think you really have like people, it's like their calling almost, And I don't know, like with what I said with the police earlier, like, because in my experience, I have met like police officers like before, and when there was one time, like I was out with a friend and we had to provide statement for this woman who had been gone through something. And honestly, I was so impressed with it was the Sapphire division. I don't know if this is
Sapphire.
So there's and they were so good and gentle, and I was so impressed. I was like, oh, you guys are angels and saints, you know what I mean? It's like, because you need people like that, And so I think it's such a shame when obviously there's gonna be bad elements out there, like in anywhere, but it's just like, I guess like hearing that story from that person who was telling me about her daughter is like, it really frightens you, because it just takes that one time, and it's like really scary. But at the same time, I'm guessing, like, I'm asking you now, because obviously you see so much, right? You're exposed to so much of the sordid side of how things can turn out, or you get where things have just gone wrong. And so is there like, how do you, because I know you said about the cynicism, but obviously you still have to walk around and do your thing every day and have your life, right? How do you sort of go around not let it impact you? Or maybe it does, I don't know. Like, how do you not let it impact you completely? And
I think years of experience have meant that I'm able to be a little bit more objective, but certainly for students, I have to check in terms of triggering cases. So I have to make sure that before students are allocated cases, we kind of do a wellbeing check in terms of the content of those cases. And anyone that does find a case triggering is obviously kind of adjusted and moved around to work on something different. But in terms of wellbeing from my own perspective, I think I'm sometimes there are cases that stick with you and obviously stay with you. I'm quite a talker anyway, so I kind of talk these things out either with my family or with my colleagues. But it's the students, I think, that reinvigorate me. And I think where the focus is on their learning and developing this next cohort of future employers for the criminal justice system, or employees for the criminal justice system, I think that means that I'm a little bit better equipped to kind of adjust my focus so I don't absorb the content of some of the cases too much. Obviously, I want to do the best, and I want to be able to, fulfill those applications for the Criminal Cases Review Commission. But experience has enabled me to be a little bit more objective than I was otherwise when I first started out doing this.
Yeah, no, and do you know what? It's interesting because you just remind me of something when you mentioned about your students being, equipped for the future, and it's like the future generation of lawyers, solicitors, barristers, because that's the thing that that's sort of like I picked up when I was researching what you do and the IPL, was that even though, like, it doesn't matter. I mean, I know you can, it matters, but it's like, let's say even if there is no one exonerated at this day today, the other side of it, which it's almost impossible to quantify, is that everyone who goes through the IPL and learns, the students and even like the lawyers who are doing the pro bono work, are seeing the traps to avoid and how to actually make sure that your case is super tight and that you go over everything, because hindsight is 2020. So they're actually learning a different way of thinking because they have to like undo this whole case that's like, that was closed, and they have to go in and go back in that logic and find out what the gaps were. But the thing is, that way of thinking and that way of problem solving is going to make them so much better for when the client who's been arrested, no idea what's happening, gives them a call, and they're going to be like, right, they've just learned so much by going through this process of what happens when it goes wrong, why it goes wrong, that they're going to be much better, exponentially better than if they hadn't gone through the IPL. So that is like, that is a strong legacy there, Louise, so I don't think it's anything to, you can't dismiss that, so that is like already a win.
Lovely. Yeah, that's lovely to hear. But actually, it's not just lawyers and solicitors. My students become police officers, probation officers. They work for charities in the criminal justice system. I've got one that's a podcaster and a journalist. Others become teachers. But I think, some people work in kind of risk analysis. But I think what stays with them is the impact that this type of work has on them, but also the empathy that they develop for individuals who are in prison. It's a sector of society that is so often forgotten, but they are still part of society. And if you believe that prison is supposed to be rehabilitation, then why can't we think about the people that are in there as part of our society? And I think it opens their eyes up to how society, or that part of society, is treated. And so more often than not, whatever role they then go into, whether that's in the criminal justice system or on the periphery of it, they have a lifelong learning, as it were, about that sector of society. And they look at things very differently, including, this different perspective about the criminal justice system.
Yes, no, exactly. But that's a really, really good ripple effect. It goes across different areas, and that's definitely going to stay with them. How can I help you make people care? Like, how can me and my listeners support you in getting the organization more support and help? Like, what can we do? How do we do this? Because I didn't actually know about the IPL. I knew about the Innocence Project in the US through Instagram, I think, or I can't remember. No, it was something else. No, I did ask. That's the thing. I was asking on Facebook a couple of years back about those kinds of organizations. And I was like, who's around? Like, do you know of a good one? Who would want to speak with me? And they mentioned the Innocence Project. And then I didn't realize there was one in London. So how can we help? Like, there's like a marketing PR issue. We need to get this out there. I know that it's probably not like Fathers for Justice. You probably can't go up into do some guerrilla marketing on what was it they were doing? Like, they go on the buildings and stuff and dress up like Superman or whatever. But what can we do? Like, how can we support you?
So I think definitely you can get involved by checking out our website. You can follow us on Twitter, you can follow us on Insta, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook as well, and just engage, watch some of the things that are on the website, read some of the student stories. They're also on the website about why they want to do this type of work. Know about us, tell your friends about us, but more importantly, I think the more that word of mouth spreads, the more it will reach the people that need us. And the more it will reach the individuals, including family members. I get lawyers reaching out to me. I get family members reaching out to me. I get letters directly from individuals, in prison. And still there are people that don't know that we exist and don't know what we do. And whilst there's no cast iron promises that we can take on the case, when we do the assessment, you do get back a lot of information about, why it's not eligible, which will hope enable people to understand what they then need to do if they want to further an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. Tell your friends, everybody. I'm definitely going to be telling everybody. So
Thank you.
I wanted just a little bit, this is a bit, it's speculative, but I want to do a bit of pretending we have a crystal ball here. Do you think there would be a world where where IPL wouldn't even be needed anymore? Like, is that possible, where things actually go right? Would that be possible?
Oh God, what a question. You're so good at these questions. I'd like to say yes, but I think for the reason that because the criminal justice system is made up of individuals who are humans, who are doing their own little bits in each component part of the system, and humans make errors because we are human. So whilst I would like to say yes, and whilst I'd like to think that, it's a possibility, I think whilst the system stays the way that it is, I think that can't happen because, mistakes occur for many, many reasons. Individuals make mistakes for numerous reasons. And all the time, whilst that happens, and there are people, maintaining their innocence, genuinely maintaining their innocence, then I think our services are needed. We don't work, we work alongside the Criminal Cases Review Commission. I'm fortunate enough to have lawyers that I can reach out to that, review our applications and work with us. So, I'm aware of our limitations as an organisation, and I work and find ways to kind of to get around those and to make sure that that we represent our clients to the best possible standard that we absolutely can. So, yeah, I would like to say yes, but I'm so cynical. It's a no.
Would you say like the main sort of like pain point is like maybe like funding so that you can get more resources, more people? Because obviously a lot of things take time, right? And you need people and it's time consuming. Would that be something that sort of helps? Like if I was to be super prescriptive?
Yeah, people ask me about funding. Funding would give me someone else to work with me, because at the moment I'm at the, I get pots of funding from various research that I do that I plough back into the organisation to get someone to work with me. At the moment, I've got a great individual, Serpil Taz, who's a former student of the IPL and a former graduate, and an aspiring barrister who's working with me on the Innocence Project London. And, she's been funded by pots of money, but she's not permanent. So to be able to kind of fund a role that is outside of the university would be absolutely brilliant. At the moment, I'm grateful that the university supports me and does what it can to help. But certainly, the more individuals that you have working in an organisation like this, the better you are able to have a focus on the cases that you do. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that we don't now, but, dedicated caseworkers would, as you say, be able to work through the deconstruction of those cases quicker.
And that makes sense. And that's why large companies can move things very fast, because they have all these people, entry level doing all the research, and then they do the PowerPoints to the other people. I mean, in different types of industry, it all levels up, and then, it's just, so it does make a difference. How do you see the future of IPL?
So the IPL became a charity in August 2020. So while it's an independent organisation, a charitable organisation that based at the University now of Greenwich, which is great, I would like to say that we will carry on doing the job that we do to the really high standards. I'm proud of the fact that I get numerous comments back from law firms and from other individuals where, maybe individuals have not liked the fact that we've not been able to complete a case. They respected it, but not liked it. They've gone to law firms, shown them the closing report, and the comments that have come back from that law firm is, we couldn't have done anything else. You've done brilliantly. You've given reasons. You've set everything out. There is nothing more that we could have looked at from this. And we just wanted to let you know. And so that to me means that we are working to a good standard. We're working to an effective standard. And so I'd like to think that we would carry on doing that and provide access to justice for, a section of society, as I've said, that, unless they've got lots of money, can't otherwise afford the support that they need to make an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because lawyers are expensive, for sure.
Yeah.
And they're not all as good. People assume that because it says lawyer, they're good, but no. So I want to ask you the two finishing thoughts I ask all of my guests. And the first one is, what do you wish you'd realized at 18, but really understood on a cellular level, not just cognitive, like really knew it in your heart?
Oh gosh, that's good. So I think if I taking myself back to my 18th self or 18-year-old self, I would I would like to have known that you can't be responsible for how others behave. That you can, the best you can do is treat others how you would like to be treated, knowing and hoping that that will be seen and that people will learn to do the same back, but not to ever expect it back.
Yes, yes, yeah, for sure. And also, like, I find also it also do you think it also sort of like ripples down to that? It also means that you can't control people's opinion because they're gonna judge you anyway. So because people judge you with how they in some also how people treat you is also a type of opinion from them to you, right? Can be like do you feel like that goes hand in hand a little bit? Like to not, it means that you don't really, unless people are really close to you, like people's opinion doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think there's that sense as well that if my 18-year-old self hadn't been so influenced by what other people thought of me, maybe, and how other people behaved towards me, um, I think I would probably, I would have got to the position that I've got to in terms of being more robust against that type of behavior a lot quicker. Because my view now is that how other people behave is their problem.
Yes.
I'll keep my side of the street clean in terms of how I respond to them and how I treat them, which is,
Yeah.
how I'd like to be treated myself. It's just, you go through some harsh life lessons to get to that position, don't you?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, definitely, definitely. I mean, it just, yeah. No, I mean, you can't buy the life experience. It's just something that happens, and you can always say, "Oh, if at that age, if I knew." But so that question is a little bit of a, it's a bit of a naughty question, really, because it's almost irrelevant, but in a way, it kind of is because it kind of shows you that without the experience, there's no way you could get to where you are now, to that understanding where you are today. It just is what it is. We just gotta earn your stripes to get to that
Yeah.
level of peace and understanding. Um, and the second question is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
Um, I don't stay as silent as I did. I think if I see something, I've realized that if I see something I don't like, if I see behavior that is wrong on any level, I don't have to be the loudest person in the room to get my voice heard. There are ways and means of tackling things. There are ways and means of speaking up. It doesn't have to be confrontational. You can be quite clever about it. And that's, I guess that's something that I don't put up with anymore. I don't put up with staying silent.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I guess like knowing how to do it, that's a skill in its own. I may need a crash course from you. There are some people at work sometimes are like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've got a good cohort of people that we bounce ideas off of. So yeah.
Well, this is it. Yeah, you're definitely surrounded by very smart people. So, before you tell us where we can find you, support you, and all of the good stuff, is there anything else you'd like to share with us that you may not have had the chance to? I may have cut you off or something like that. Is there anything that you'd like to share?
I think that despite the fact that the Innocence Project London hasn't exonerated anybody, and I'm going to say that we will because we will. I'd like to just share with your listeners something that my very good friend John Huffington said. John Huffington is from Baltimore. He spent 32 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit, and he was recently pardoned by his state governor. And one of the things that he says that has absolutely always stuck with me is that when he was convicted and when he, maintaining his innocence for that length of time, he wanted his name back. And I think people just need to realize that being convicted of something that you didn't do, you lose your identity into the criminal justice system. You more importantly, when he says his name, he loses who he was because he was always associated with those crimes and that which he didn't do. And that is something that stays with people and that you can't get rid of. But for him, being pardoned in the way that he's done and fighting for the length of time that he has, is so significant. And I think that is a thought that has always stayed with me. Wrongfully convicted people lose their name, and they shouldn't have to.
Can I ask you, is being pardoned different from wrongful?
Being exonerated.
From being exonerated, is that different?
Yeah, without going into too much detail, being pardoned by the governor doesn't expunge your conviction, but it means there's an acknowledgement of innocence. You can read all about John Huffington's story. He's got a book out. You can find his book on Amazon. John, I'm plugging you here. But he is a brilliant inspiration. He is a constant inspiration to me. I think that's the best thing. They're the best way that I can get people to understand the impact of wrongful convictions.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that I've been wondering is that, because even when you are exonerated, right, and you're out back into the outside world, there is a stain on, like you said with the name, right? There is really a stain, because people will always think, yeah, but did he or did she or did they? And it's and that's the hard part. Even if you don't go to prison, and let's say you've been accused and it gets splashed out onto the paper before you even gone to court and done all the procedure, and they find, oh yeah, no, our bad, not guilty, wrong person. The fact that your name has been associated with an accusation like that is already too late. Like, it's like I don't think, it's like that is the problem, as well with all of this, is that there is a stain, and that's that effect on that person it takes for it's a very that must be really, really, really hard, and it takes a very long time, if ever, like, to be able to get rid of that quote unquote stain. If anyone Googles you, that's it, they found it, and that's real injustice. Yeah,
it is, but it goes wider than just the individual that's been convicted. It's the family as well. The family have to live with that impact. And no matter what, whether you're proclaimed innocent, as you are in the US, or whether your conviction is found to be unsafe, which it is over here in England, that wrongful conviction will always be associated with you as a person. And there is no amount of compensation that will suffice to deal with that situation. I can't imagine that situation. And it's so very, very difficult and painful to think that there are people that don't have to imagine that situation that live it. And that's challenging. Society shouldn't have to do that to people. We shouldn't be doing that to people, but it happens.
Yeah, we really let them down. I mean, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about the family and those things. But yeah, for sure. I mean, that's like, I can't even imagine how that's, So, Louise, I want to say such a big thank you to you. And please tell us, where can people find out more? How can they get in touch with you? Do you want them to be in touch? Like, how do you want people to contact you? How can they support you? How can they read more about this? Like, give us all the good stuff.
Okay, so we have a website, which is www.iplondon.org. There's lots of information on there. There's a little webinar that I did around CCTV evidence in court with a colleague. There's lots of stuff on there. There's student voices on there, lots of information about what we do. You can also donate via the website as well. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook on the tag @Innocence London. And we are on Instagram, Innocence Project London, and also on LinkedIn, Innocence Project London. My details are on the website. Please, get in touch. I'm always happy to have people get in touch and reach out to me. As you can tell, I love a conversation about what I do. So by all means, educate yourselves, find out more about what we do, find out more about when we host events, and support us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And know your rights, everybody.
Know your rights.
Know your rights. Yeah. Thank you so much, Louise. Such a pleasure. And I'm rooting for you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, Andrew.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe, follow it on Spotify or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. Until next time.
Using health inappropriately.